Okay. Hi, everyone.
A very good evening
Welcome
to all of
to.
you.
Uh,
Law Essentials welcomes you to the 11th edition of the webinar on crime, fiction, and media, a complex relationship between criminology and society. Law Essentials builds the community of lifelong learners by bridging the gap between where we are and where we want to go. I am Mohammad Faransi, founder at Law Essentials and a student of St. Joseph's College of Law, Bengaluru. We are glad to introduce the speaker for today's session, Ms. Sonal Priya. She is a research fellow at World Mediation Organization and has completed her master's from University of Edinburgh. We are delighted to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you.
So here we
So,
proceed to the much awaited event. Over to you, ma'am.
uh, Thank you very much, Farhan. So, the topic today that I have chosen is crime fiction and media, and this is mainly because there have been a continuous conflict between how much media or how much crime and the show of crime affects us in real life that is shown in fictional media. And generally, there are two school of thoughts. One says that there is absolutely no effect of crime fiction in real life and crime media in real life. And the other school of thought says that there is a huge impact of crime and its depiction in media and society and the crime in real life. So I have done extensive research on this topic, and there is a third school of thought which is not very popular at the moment. But there are certain things in every crime fiction, and there are certain concepts in every crime fiction that has been impacting our society at large, that has been affecting the way we function, the way we perceive crime, the way we treat our victims in a very specific way. And that is something I would want to discuss in this webinar. And it affects the way normal people treat crime and perceive crime, and our law, legal authorities, justice system, and any other such bodies that deals with crime, sees crimes and victims. And this is why this topic becomes very important. So, does it have a direct impact on society? Does crime fiction actually has an impact on society? There's no yes or no answer to this. Reason being, firstly, is that the crime that we see in crime fiction or the crime that we see in movies or TV series, they are a lot disproportionate than crimes that happen in real life. So there are several research that are being conducted and that have shown that mostly the crimes, and this is applicable to all sort of crime fiction, whether it's an Indian based or whether it's screened in US, whether it has uh, a Netflix or Amazon as a platform or it has been shown in TV channels, it's uniform everywhere. The crimes that are shown in these fictions are much more disproportionate than those crimes when happen in real life. For example, most of this media, more than 50%, about sometimes about 80 to 90%, if you have a small data set, the crimes relate to something that is sexually assaulting. However, in real life, it's seen that the crimes that are sexual assault, that comes under the definition of sexual assault, are much, much less than these crimes that are shown. Second thing that comes from media is they show you a particular kind of victim. So several years of understanding ethnography and understanding the different uh, TV series and how they have shown media, how they have shown crime in their media, there has been a concept of an ideal and non-ideal victims. So if you see US media for that matter, the ideal victim is always a white woman. And if you see the Indian media, it's mostly upper class women. And the crimes that are against them are mostly sexual assault crimes. However, when you see real life and the real statistics of where crimes happen, in US, most crime happens against the black community and the black woman. And in India, it mostly happens to the lower strata of the society economically. So those are certain things that we have taken from the crime fiction. Also, one very interesting thing is that most of the crimes that the sexual assault crime fiction, when they show that you in media, they show the criminals and the people who commit those crimes being strangers to the woman. and that is why it is perceived that are under threat of strangers. So all your uh, things about not going late, not moving around late at night, or having curfew timings at home, at universities, at hostels, all those come from those kind of perceptions. However, it is seen in real life that most of the crimes that belongs under the category of sexual assault are committed by someone that is known to the stranger, which is not depicted in the crime fiction. Now, these are some facts and some statistics of how crime fiction is very much different in real life than crime in real life. Crime fiction is very very sensitive and has very sensational topics so that it can appeal to the viewers compared to how crime happens in real life and to whom crimes happen in real life. But why do people still connect to it? Why do people still think that this is how crimes take place? These are the ideal victims against whom crime takes place. These are the ideal criminals who actually commit the crime. So I will be discussing two main theories, which are sociological theories. So they have not come out from crime fiction. They are the theories that have been developed by sociologists to see how societies work and how crime fiction has taken those theories from society and combined them while making their shows. And that is the motivating factor of why we think that crime fiction is so similar to crimes in real life. So first theory is called theory of paternalism. Now, the name might confuse you, but paternalism applies to everyone. It applies to every person who is around us. It applies to every person living in any society for that matter. So, what does theory of paternalism means? It means that the person who is committing the crime or the person who is the victim, it said that that person has denied the ability to make choices. That's the first theory of paternalism, which means that the person does not have the ability, the victim does not have the ability to make choices for herself or himself. And that is why a crime has occurred against him. So if you see the most popular crime fiction shows in India, say it's Savdan India or any movies that you see for that example, or if you go to US media, if you see Criminal Minds or you see Special Victims Unit, you'll see, or one of the best example for this is the recent Netflix series You. So in all those series, the victims are portrayed as if they don't have enough ability to make good choices, and this is shown by their history, the way the people they have been with. So they'll probably show their love connections as really bad people, or their jobs or their bosses as bad people, and they're not able to understand the bad side of them. And that is how they first make these victims portrayed as if they don't have a sense of responsibility, they don't have a proper sense of understanding what choices do they make. And if you see, this is very similar to what society thinks about women, or how they used to think about how women make choices. And even now, if you see the crimes that are pertaining to or that are related to honor killings or that are relating to caste atrocities, most of them are because people tend to believe that the people who have committed those crimes do not know what to do. They don't have the ability to see what is good for them and what is bad for them. And this is the relationship between society and people that these crime fictions take into account to make the stories more appealing to people. Another thing is that they alter the condition that is called the nudging aspect of theory of paternalism, which means that you don't actually do jobs for the victim, but you alter the conditions around them so they act in a certain way. So again, I'll take you as an example because that's a very good example for nudging. You don't, so the criminal, they don't actually do anything directly that results to a bad choice that the victim has made, but they alter the conditions that make them take a certain kind of choice, that make them have a certain kind of choice. And same applies to things like cyberbullying, cyber stalking, or real stalking for that matter. alter the conditions around the person, and especially when the criminal is someone who is related or known to the victim, the conditions are altered in such a way that the victim makes certain kind of decision, and it does not look wrong, is because you have already removed the victim's sense of responsibility. So when you see crime fiction and any woman against whom the crime is committed, also I'm taking women as example because in crime fiction there is very less, probably just 5% of cases that where the victim is someone else than women. Especially when you talk about women victims or child victims, you always first remove the crime fiction always first removes the sense of responsibility and ability to make right choices from the character, and then they move on to the perpetrator nudging them to do something. So maybe a blackmail, or maybe uh, contacting them as a stranger, or giving them certain kind of benefits. And because the producers or the directors have already removed the sense of responsibility, that nudging does not look like fault of the criminal. It looks as if another uh, avoiding or another problematic characteristics of the victim. Now, next is that in certain crime fictions, generally, if they're not showing a direct crime, the theory of paternalism shows intention. So again, this comes in a lot of crimes which shows honor killings, where they show that the intention of the perpetrator is not correct. They show that the perpetrator did not have any other choice. So when you already have shown that the victim is not the victim is not capable enough to make good decisions, and the or the people with the criminal has changed the circumstances around the victim, so they have made many more bad choices, it becomes very easy to show that their actions are a result of good intentions. And it again relates to the fact that, and the dialogues that these movies and TV series has, where they say sometimes good people have to do bad things, or things like bad people do good things. So these are the dialogues which promotes such kind of theories of paternalism to make the audience believe that their intentions were in fact not wrong or not criminal in nature. So these are the three subpoints of what theory of paternalism means. And all of these are sociological theories, and they tell you that what what the victim is, how the victim acts, and how it plays out in crime fiction. Another theory that plays out very well in crime fiction that is taken from society is theory of neutralization. Now, generally, when there is any crime fiction movie about an underworld mafia or a don or in any such kinds, so for example, in Indian context, any movies like Dawn or movies like Rais, where they show where they show mafia and underworld people, you see that they use theory of neutralization, so the audience connect to it. What is theory of neutralization is that they portray that the criminal has a higher sense of loyalty, which means that they'll generally show that the criminal or the don or the mafia is a very nice person. He gives stuff to poor people. He has built places for poor people, and is actually really fighting against the the corrupt government, or has faced certain sort of injustice as a child, and that is the reason why they have resorted to become a criminal or become a mafia. Or another way to approach this is that they show that the criminals have higher sense of loyalty or denial of the victim, which basically means that they show that they are nice to other people except some people, and those some people that they are not nice to are mostly either the government or other capitalists, or probably some other rivals or people like that. To other people, like children, like their family, like people who work with them, they're nice, they take care of their families, they take care of their education, their food, and a lot other things. So that is the way that they neutralize their actions and they neutralize the crime by making the criminals giving them a concession on by making them do other good things, and that is theory of neutralization, where you balance their good deeds and compensate them against the bad things that they're doing. And this again comes from a very social perspective. It's again a sociological theory, as I said. So it basically comes that people who commit small things like a theft or probably a mugging, for that example, in Western concept, they are shown or they generally come from a lower economic class background, or they show that uh, any such crimes are a result of social injustice, and that is the justification for the crime. So that is what theory of neutralization does. It gives justification of the actions that these criminals are doing, justification of actions that happens in the dynamics of where the crime scenes are based. And some theories surely doesn't, but some crime fiction surely doesn't, because some are very evident in how the crime was committed and what happened. However, you see, the good behavior part or bad childhood specifically is something that is present throughout the media. Also, even like the crime media where the crime fiction where people did not like the victim, even they use these kind of theories. For example, recent, if you see Rani Mukherjee's Mardani, or you see You Again for that matter, or you see many episodes of if you watch any of Indian based series, you'll see that all these criminals have a backstory. They have a reason for being bad. They were either not treated well, or they were brought up in really bad conditions. They had a bad parent. They had someone who used to beat them up. They have faced several kinds of crime themselves. They have faced atrocities from the government, atrocities from authorities, and several such things. Even for movies that shows terrorists and how someone becomes terrorist or civil rebellion, they show a lot of injustice that happens as a compensation or as a justification of why those people ended up becoming a criminal. And this becomes problematic because then people start sympathizing with these characters, and that is why we celebrate these characters. So all these movies that shows mafias, like for example Narcos or uh, Dawn, or any such movies, people relate to them because they start empathizing with the situation that those people are facing, with the situation that the criminals have faced in the past, and the reasons of why they have become a criminal or resorted to criminal activities. So that is something. This theory is something that gives people a sense of empathy with the criminal, and which is why it is another sociological theory that crime fictions use, so that they get more audience and more audience relating to them. And so what effect does it have in society? Now obviously society has an effect of in media, and I have explained in a much deeper level on why and which theories of society are so much connected in media. Now what does media do in return? What does this crime fiction do in return to the society? And that is the nexus that I'll be talking about next, about these crimes and how they in return impact the society. Now, what we have understood so far is that these theories already exist in the society. These theories are not something that has been created with crime fiction over the years. However, they have adopted it from society and strengthened it further. So all these movies that are criticized these days and have several views of whether people should be celebrating such movies or not. Recently, one of the most controversial being Kabir Singh. So people, some people liked it, some people liked the character, some said that such stories shouldn't be made. But again, why? So if you see that in terms of neutralization, theory of neutralism and paternalism, it was very much similar to these two theories, because the way that the actress should have acted, or her character and her being fully dependent on the male protagonist, and him being very nice doctor and very helping, but again doing hitting people or being very aggressive were justified by him being a nice person and doing all these things out of love. So again, we see the theories of intention, we see the theories of denial of victims' responsibility and not being good enough to make good choices, and also both and a combination of several other theories to justify the characters of Kabir Singh. And that is why there were several people who actually supported them, and some people also said that some theorists also said that these things does not have a direct impact. So one side is these theories, when depicted, has a very big impact because they strengthen such kind of beliefs. Because the more media that is released that has this kind of things in fiction, the more these theories will be strengthened because people will keep relating to them. And why it will have further impact is the next theory, which is basically that most of us, most people, do not incur crime in their real lives. Most of us will never see a crime that directly happens to us or happens to someone who's closely related to us. The only reference that we have to crime and how crimes happen is through crime fiction and crime media and news channels and several such, so basically media platforms. So that is the reason that everybody sees crimes and accepts exactly how it is in media. And because fiction has such dramatized views and sensational depictions of the crimes, it becomes much more impactful on the people who are watching those, because those people are probably the ones who are never going to see any sort of crime happening to them or someone who is very near to them. And that is why it becomes a big impact. Now, there are few theories again, or there are few impacts that have been analyzed over the years. First being fear of crime. So again, that fear of crime means that we don't know when crime happens or to whom crimes happen, but when we see movies or when we see TV series that related to crime, it tells us where the crimes happen. They have a proper setting, probably nighttime, probably a girl being alone, probably a girl being drunk. So they set up such sort of scenarios that tells you when crimes happen. And even if you see the tagline, so for example, a very famous very popular Indian TV series like Southern India or Crime Patrol, they set a crime scene for you, which is mostly either during night or either during victim being alone or either after uh, doing something that was told not to be done or any such sort of thing. So the atmosphere that is set for the audience where crimes happen generates a fear of crime in those audience. And that is when people start relating to it and understanding how crimes happen. So this is what a very big problem that the United States faced before and also that has resulted to all the recent recent Black Lives Matter protests and all those things. Why that has happened is because U.S. media for a really long time, the fiction portrayed most of their crimes happening in the localities and the cities where and the criminals and the people who commit crime belong to those black communities or immigrant communities. So, and that was something that was present in every crime fiction that was created for over say 20 25 years, that all the criminals were portrayed mostly as blacks committing crime against white uh, mostly white females. Now what this did was created a fear in minds of people who were living in white communities that the people who commit crimes belong to black communities, and that resulted into several sort of racism and then crimes against black people and atrocities against black people, which has finally resulted to the protest that's happening at the moment. Now This has also we can see the similar thing happening for several other communities. For example, after 9/11, all the media that was made or all the media that was shown, the criminal communities or the terrorist communities were always depicted as people who belong to Islamic communities or follow Islam. And that's how the belief that US already has or already had about Muslim immigrants being terrorists got strengthened, and now it has become to or has come to an extent that everyone has responded it with Islamophobia or not wanting to mingle with any immigrant community or mistaking every immigrant as a Muslim. So these are few things that have had direct impact on how crime fiction has showed certain communities over the years. So it does not only strengthen what people think crime is or what people think certain kind of atrocity. It does not only normalizes the things that are already existing, but also gives a very large audience a sense of what crime is and how crimes take place. And that in return affects how people act in their societies or how they treat someone in the societies. Now, similar thing goes for sexism, which brings me to the second thing, which is basically digitization of rape culture. And we have talked, there are several talks about what rape culture is, how it affects people, how it affects women, how it affects men, how it has affected in every aspect of life. But what happened when you digitize the rape culture, when crime fiction starts promoting things that are something that should be perceived as degrading to women? So what happens is that when you talk about how women should be or women should act, and if they don't act in a certain way, they face crime, is you're telling society basically how if women will not act in a certain way, they'll face crime. So a very good series, a very good Netflix original talking about this was a movie called Guilty. So if anyone of you have seen this, you can see that they show an ideal victim and an ideal criminal. So if they show a woman who's flirtatious or who has a background of several sexual partners or who have a background of drinking or clothes or have clothes that not conventionally seen as very good Indian woman clothes or conservative clothes. They show that those women are likely to be lying about any accusations against any man. Those women uh, tend to get more tend to have more crimes against them than others who follow the norm of what a good woman should be, like not drinking, being home at time, not going out, listening to every male or every authoritative figure. So this is something that is again strengthened by the crime fiction that you show. So if the crime fiction starts depicting all the women who have faced certain kind of things or who do certain kind of things that are not conventional, a very good representation of good women, they face crimes and they strengthen this. And this is basically what rape culture is. So if you come out of digital world, you'll see that people who there are a lot of people who question women's clothing and their alcohol consumption and several other factors like this to any crimes that was committed against them. When you take this to digital platform, not only are these thoughts of rape culture, or these things of rape culture is promoted and accepted, it also becomes available to several people and who might not think the same way. So if even if someone is not thinking in a certain way and there is abundance of media that's showing this in fiction form as well, a lot of abundance of media that shows or portrays this to people on how this women should act and what results in crime. And the people who probably don't think it that way will also start thinking it because that's the only way they're actually seeing how crimes happen to women, how crimes have happened to women over years. So that is something that is one thing that the crime fiction have done is that they have digitized this rape culture. This is something, the digitalization of rape culture and sexism is something that does not only happen in crime media or crime fiction, it is something that persists on all sort of fiction. So any love stories where you see, especially the love stories that we have seen over the last 20 years in India, has a lot of certain things that people don't etc., are trivialized. For example, stalking. So if you see most of the love stories between 90s and early 2000s, all of them had some sort of stalking, some sort of manipulation by the male protagonist to the actress, or had some sort of lying or manipulation or cyber stalking, or several such kind of things. And all of them were justified by the love that the male protagonist had towards the woman. Now, this crime fiction has not understood that is something that the crime fiction has not understood, or people have trivialized understanding what crime fiction can do to the society. Now, one of the main reasons why crime fiction has not understood resulted to severe cyberbullying, that has resulted to severe sorts of different modes that people think are okay to do with women. So basically, it pertains to cyber stalking, sending unsolicited pictures, and basically the things where causing annoyance, which basically cause teasing. And if you see in real life are punishable offenses, like you cannot send unsolicited pictures, you cannot cyberbully a girl, you cannot keep persisting on or asking a woman to go out with you, or resorting into acid attacks, or resorting into any sort of violence if you get no as an answer. However, all these media that has that all these fiction, all these love stories that we have seen in a long, long time, violence or continuous stalking or continuous annoyance was something that was very prevalent, and hence it has become very accepted in today's time. It has become very accepted on how people perceive what are acceptable things to do while pursuing a woman. And even many movies have certain dialogues or certain scenes set up on what women like, or how you can actually pursue a woman, or you can get a woman on 6 days or 7 days, or several such kind of things. All those things comes from these theories, the theories of neutralization, where the person, the male protagonist, has good intention at heart, or they are just altering the environment to nudge the woman to a certain act. And all those acts of violence, or all those acts of manipulation, are in several aspects, if you see, related to some sort of crime or some sort of annoyance, maybe cyberbullying or cyber stalking, or actual stalking or actual violence or assault, or several such kind of things. So this is something that crime fiction has done over the time, because it is in such abundance. These small crimes that does not amount to a more severe offense are absolutely neglected, although they happen a lot in real life. So especially about stalking, because stalking was very recently acknowledged as a severe crime, a crime that has an actual impact in the society, or crime that has actual impact on how women live, how women form their ways, or form their ways of living, or how they, where they opt for work, or which shifts do they get, or do, and how they work in their work environment. All these things comes from this digitization of rape culture, and what the fiction has shown us over the time, or certain crimes that are crime in real life but are shown as to be a norm in fiction. So, because of their abundance, people have started thinking that those things are very normal things to do and not actually amounts to crime. So, if you see any, so for example, the drugs or cigarettes or use of alcohol, whenever they are shown in the movies, they show that these things are not good for health, or we are not promoting consumption of anything. However, any crimes like domestic violence or assault or any such sort of violence have never had any sort of disclaimer. And that is where I'll move to the the last subtopic of this webinar, which is basically the formation of policies. And do government have right to form policies in these topics? Does the government have any authority in the making any policy that can decrease such sort of perception of crimes or depiction of crimes? Now, as most of us know, or how India works in terms of censorship and in terms of managing crime fiction and release of movies, TV series, we have seen that the censor board have been very active in not promoting or any kind of sanity, nudity, any sort of things that can be offensive to any community or any religion. So, and they just limit themselves to that area. They do not really move on to talk about all the other such kind of theories and such kind of very small things that has affected the society at large over the time. So, do our media has about do the government or do the censor board has the power to uh, control media in that way, to make our crime fiction in a certain way. Now, when it comes to performers' rights and when it comes to the creative rights of directors and producers, there is not much that can be done in terms of direct liability. There cannot be much that can be done to stop people from creating certain kind of content. So at large, based on the perception of the society, there are certain policies that are made. There are certain ways in which the people, the censor board and the government has tried to restrict on how people act or how people uh, produce any crime fiction. However, in recent days, we have seen that is reducing in time, and that is reducing reducing day by day. So the reason that they are reducing day by day is because of the art and the liberty of the performers and the creators to portray such crimes and portray what is there and what's not, what people should watch. Because government wants to stay away from most of things because of the liberty that the creative sector has been given in the society. However, I believe that there are certain things that needs to be taken into consideration, because there are some limits to that. The censor board do limit, uh, do interfere at a limited extent to how these places, how people have their creative rights exercised. However, one of the major problems is that for years and for a very long time, most of the people who are on the board of making policies and making laws, they they have been male members, and they do not really see beyond the nudity or offensive comments, and they have not really tried to censor any of these things. They have not really tried to understand the severity of the crimes that are shown against women, and how women are depicted as ideal victims and non-ideal victims, and how these social problems and social sexism has gone in institutional nature by being depicted as such in crime series. However, there is obviously some sort of liberty that the censor board can take in at least giving some disclaimers at the beginning of the movie or at the end of the movie, or limiting such kind of content while being produced or while being depicted in crime fiction. or they can set up guidelines as to how as to not celebrating these characters in the end, not celebrating the bad guys in the end, or trying to promote the crime fiction that shows that these things are wrong and tries to break the barriers of what neutralization or theory of paternalism does to the victims. And those are certain kind of things that the censor board or the authorities can actually do, because they cannot absolutely stop the production of such kind of media, crime fiction. However, the regulating certain sets of such crime fiction, limiting the numbers of or prescribing the kinds of crime that can be shown, or the limit the numbers of every kind of crime that can be shown, or providing guidelines as to telling that okay, this show showed these kind of crimes, and these crimes are crime under these sections and in no way celebrated or shown. And this belongs to this means for every small crime, every single crime, which includes things like stalking or cyberbullying or annoyance causing being caused to several women or men or children for that matter. So there are certain kind of these things that can be raised as awareness programs rather than laws itself, and banning in making of such movies or such crime fiction that can be done. So as to conclude, and then I'll take your questions if you have any, I'll just say that there are certain things in society that has been adapted by media and crime fiction and become a norm in showing those things and have had a lot of audience in the past. However, it's high time that we understand that what media can do to a society, what fiction can do to real life and to victims more importantly, is because it helps you treat victim better, it helps you identify crimes, and it helps all of us to have a more fair treatment of people who have had crimes committed against them, and see all the crimes as bad to society, as opposed to having certain sort of justifications based on ideal and non-ideal victims, and ideal and non-ideal criminals, or ideals or an ideal or non-ideal crime for that matter. So that was my thoughts on crime fiction and its complex relationship with society, and what it means and what it has done to us. And take any questions if anyone has after this.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that enriching and enlightening session. We have questions coming in from the audience. The first question is prison an effective punishment? Does the possibility of prison deter people from criminal behavior?
Okay. So again, I'll just say that everything has had several school of thoughts of whether something is an effective punishment or not, and prison, for that matter, has in modern times, prison has been seen as more rehabilitative in nature, in instead of being deterrent, and mostly the deterrent punishment that is there in modern world is mostly seen as things like death penalty or life imprisonment, which are used as deterrent. However, the theory of punishment that is used in prison is mostly rehabilitative. So if you see in terms of whether it is an effective punishment or not, I would say, in my personal thoughts, I believe that it can be an effective measure if it's implemented effectively. Because currently, if we see the state of prisons and the way the prisons are at the moment, the rehabilitation stops the moment the person comes out of the prison. And when they come out, there are several things in the society that is affecting those criminals. And to get back to society, just coming out of the prison is not as easy as it is made to believe to people who have never seen prison. And I think that is the main problem with prison not being an effective punishment, is because the people who come out of prison are left to go nowhere and are discriminated, and which is why the rehabilitative theory of prison is failing. However, I believe that there are several uh, uh, criminals and several people who are kept in prison, and who should be who should get a little time off, or to understand, or to, because prison is not just sending people to jail. There are several programs that happen in the prison. There are several things that are several programs run to make those prisoners skilled laborers or skilled workers so they can come out and do some kind of things. So in that way, yes, the people who do not have those resources and have resulted to certain kind of crimes, or for those people it is important. And as a deterrent it is also important, because every crime has to have a consequence, and having a consequence does deter crimes in a very big manner. However, I do believe that the prison system around the world can have a reformation for better rehabilitation of criminals.
We have the next question from Aishwarya S. Are crime fictions not subject to the rights of the accused where their identities are revealed? Is their opinion not in concern when disclosing those crimes?
Well, so the crime fictions that I'm talking about at the moment are the ones that are not uh, inspired by a true crime story. So whenever there are any true crime stories, the consent has been taken from victim, and if not victim, the first relatives of the victim. But there are several crime fictions that are not inspired by any true stories. They are purely creative in nature. So in those cases, there is no reason to take a consent from anybody, because it's absolutely a result of the person who has written it or the person who's directing it. It is absolutely a creation of their mind. So those are the crime fictions that I'm talking about, like TV series or serials or movies for that matter. However, when a true crime series is turned into a fiction, the opinion and the consent of the victim in revealing their name or identities are definitely sought.
With this, we come to the end of the session. We are privileged to have you with us today, ma'am. I would like to thank you on behalf of the entire team of Law Essentials for taking out your valuable time for conducting this wonderful webinar. I hope everyone has enjoyed this exciting and enriching session.
Thank you very much for your time, too.
Thank you all for attending the session.